Take us back to the beginning, where where it all started, and that when you took the job and what got you in and that sort of thing. Let's go all the way back to the beginning.
So it was 2006, and I had just moved back to the States. I had just gotten my master's degree in fashion design in Italy, and I had just moved back to the States, and I had a temporary 3-month job doing costume design. And I did it and really realized that it wasn't what I wanted to do at all, but I wanted to stay in the city that I was living. And so I managed to find a day job that would allow me to make a living and support myself while concurrently kind of figuring out the next steps. So that job, I was a receptionist. 6 months later, they offered me the job to be an intern for the same company. And 2 years later, I was promoted. Over a course of 8 years, my salary went up 6.5 times. So every time that I got really close to leaving, the universe would be like, oh, but are you sure? Because, like, here's a raise. And I knew, so the good news was I had a lot of freedom with it. So by the time I was done, I was only working 10 hours a week. And it was really great, but like I said, I finally got to the point where I admitted that I was so severely unhappy. Like, I was on the phone with my mom one day, and she's like, I, at the same time, had started a business doing fashion. So I was running my fashion business and had my day job. And something fell through with the fashion, and I was talking to my mom, and she said, well, why don't you just work more hours? And I said, Mom, have you ever done something every single day that makes you want to die? I said, that is what that job is to me. Yeah. Even just looking at the laptop, I worked remotely, so not even opening it. It would be sitting on my couch or whatever. I'd look at the laptop and I'd start having anxiety and just like fears and doubts and hesitation, like all this stuff. And that was like the turning, like I couldn't look back from there. After you admit something like that, how do you look backwards from that?
Exactly. And not to make light of your situation, that when, and I only say this because I know some people who their parents would make the joke out of it. The thing you hope you don't hear from your mom is, yeah, raising you every day was what I really didn't need, I mean, so she gave you support. I guess that's the, that was partly, like I said, I don't want to make light of the situation, but, I'm guessing your mom gave you support after that and said, and let me ask, what was her reaction when you asked her that question?
Well, she called a friend and was like, will you please go check on her and just make sure, like, I don't think anything's going to happen, but would you please just go check on her? No, it really became like I called her a lot after that to kind of talk to her, and she called me a lot to check in and really make a plan and kind of figure out, like, what the next steps were for me and my business. And that was in January of last year, and in May of last year, I was cutting fabric at my sewing table and had this epiphany. So my fashion brand was always about inspiring women to be women, inspiring women to figure out what that meant on the inside and then dress like that, embody it out on the outside. And what I found was that women were kind of uncomfortable doing that. Like, they didn't know how to, or they just weren't comfortable doing it. They would put on my pieces and be like, oh, this is so beautiful, I just love it, but I don't know where I'd ever wear it. So I was cutting fabric, and I had this epiphany. I was like, well, what if I can shift women's mindsets? And then if their mindset is shifted, then they'll want to start, embodying it on the outside. And so I was like, well, oh, go ahead.
So let me interrupt for a second, because that kind of sounds like that's around the turning point, right? That was where things changed from, from where you were. And that's kind of that turning point. That's kind of the turning point moment.
But I didn't know it at the time, is the cool part.
Right. I'd like to ask you a couple more questions about the beginning, because I think it's really key, because you had started off, and I want to make sure I got something right. The job you kept getting promoted, was that kind of what you had taken that you thought was going to be temporary, but then it just turned into a longer term?
Yeah. Like I said, I never wanted that job, and my heart was never in it. I really only ever did it for the paycheck and the flexibility.
And so that's really a great example for our viewers of where they might be stuck and not living a truly remarkable life, because they might have gotten into something, and whether it's money or something else, something is keeping them stuck there that they... Is it fair to say that you looked at the money as a good reason to stay?
Oh yeah, it was the only reason I stayed. The only
So
reason.
yeah, so the key there is, even if it was the only reason, it was a good it was, and let's face it, unfortunately, money rules the world, at least in our Western culture. Now, you can say that money, provides two things: happiness and or money provides choices and gives you options, which can lead to
Yep.
happiness and all the other stuff, and it can make memories. But let's face it, the almighty dollar is a key to Western survival.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so,
the job provided me so much. It did really provide me so much. I sit here and can say that I hated it, but at the same time, I bought a house at the age of 26. And, 3 years later, I sold that house and moved to Los Angeles and was able to take that job with me to Los Angeles. And I was able to survive in Los Angeles, so it gave me a lot, and it gave me a lot of freedom. It gave me a lot of flexibility, and it really opened some doors for me that I don't know if I would have taken without it. So it was kind of like that double-edged sword, you know?
and that's such a great perspective to have on it. And like I said, we'll definitely, in the second part, we're going to talk about the secrets to living a truly remarkable life. But would it be fair to say that sometimes people look at things and make decisions that are keeping them from living a truly remarkable life, and they just settle for a good life, so to speak? In other words, they settle for a
Absolutely.
job. They settle for a job they just don't like, or they might not like because the paycheck is great, or because they like the people. I mean, there's another one. Oh, I love the people I work with, but I hate the job. Well, is it really worth it? So you would say that's fair to say?
Absolutely. And, too, a lot of what I see as well is that a lot of people feel stuck in that they don't know what else they do. So it's been something that they've done so long that they're not able to see or open up to the possibility that there's something else on the other side. And so they just stay there because, either the pay is great, the coworkers are great, the flexibility is great, or they simply have no idea what's on the other side.
Now let me ask you a question before we wrap up the beginning and get into the turning point. As far as the beginning goes, was that part of what was going on with you? Did you were you kind of clouded by the money and everything else, and not, I'll say, able to see what was on the other side, or not want to see what was on the other side, at least for a time? Not near
Yeah.
the turning point in the beginning, but was that something you fell into?
Absolutely. And, even while I was concurrently running the fashion business, like I'll go into it a little bit more, but I always thought that fashion was my thing. I had like put myself in this little box and I was like, I'm a fashion designer. This is what I do. And I wasn't, I liken it to literally, those horses that have the blinders on that can't see anywhere else. Like that is what I felt like, that's how I felt like I was living, is that I was so focused on thinking that it was supposed to look one way that I just wasn't able to see the other opportunities that were coming into my life until the
Excellent.
blinders got ripped off.
And so really the turning point in this whole thing, the turning point ends up becoming, I think, the blinders really getting ripped off. That's what started everything, right?
To watch the rest of this epic episode now, click on the link below the video. Do it now, you'll be glad you did. Are you still here? What are you waiting for? Watch the rest of this epic episode now by clicking on the link below the video.